My guest today is Mikhail Falkovich. Mikhail has spent years in the front lines of cybersecurity as a former chief information security officer responsible for critical infrastructure at Con Edison, and now as a customer security officer at Microsoft. He's also deeply involved in the CISO community, helping security leaders navigate not just technology decisions, but the realities of risk, resilience, and accountability. I wanted Mikhail on this episode because he's lived the consequences of security decisions, and he's not afraid to talk about where things actually break down. Mikhail and I have had some amazing off-the-record sort of conversations on this topic, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I've got a set of questions. Hello, Mikhail. Welcome to CW Tech Talks.
Thank you, Ivo. Wonderful to be here with you. And yes, we've had some
Perfect.
wonderful conversations. Looking
Yeah,
forward to this
I'm
one.
looking forward to this for sure. So you've been on the other side of this, and when we talked about the code open, we talked about the responsibility for real infrastructure and real consequences, and what can happen when there's this attacker sort of inside the house, as we say. With that framing, does it reflect what you saw in the field, and in your experience, what did security leaders seem to overestimate, underestimate, and what do they consistently underestimate, would you say?
Sure. Well, let's start with the whole concept of inside the house, right? So
Sure.
if you think about from a engineering perspective, oftentimes folks build their perimeters and say, well, we have the firewalls in place and then everything inside the firewall is protected. Unfortunately, the reality of the situation is nowhere close to that, right? So this is the time where if organizations do not assume the zero trust mindset, they fall behind and the adversaries take advantage of that. Um, there are so many different ways that an adversary can get in, whether through zero-day vulnerabilities or regular vulnerabilities that are unpatched, or through just applications that are open for access, or through phishing. Even spear phishing still is a valid and often used way to get in,
Right.
and social engineering is becoming much, much more available to adversaries through AI implementations and otherwise. And honestly, actually, I just read a story earlier today, which really tells the scary part of the story, right, of the inside of the house. Adversaries are willing to pay thousands of dollars to individuals that are already working inside companies to actually provide them access inside of those organizations. So the perimeter is not enough, right? You really need to adopt that zero trust mindset. And from a Microsoft perspective, there's really three tenets, right? So verify explicitly. You need to know who it is that's actually coming in to access that particular function
Right.
that they need to access. Use least privileged access. So that implies that I, as a user, will have only limited access to what I need and not to other things that are not intended for me to access. And then assume breach. And that's the really, really tough one. And we're going to talk more about it, I think, today, is
For
like,
sure.
how do you survive when the adversary is already inside, right?
Yeah, no, yeah, and that's really true, and I think there's two sides to this, which is the industry. Um, there's two sides to this. The industry says penetration testing and external testing needs to look like this, and as a and as CISOs, you're saying you kind of follow that line, right? You go, this is what people are doing. This is what I need for compliance, and these are my check boxes. So, do you feel like, as an industry, we um, do we think about compliance and what happens within the box that's set up by the industry, ourselves at fault as penetration testers and penetration testing companies, and the CISO on the other side saying, "Hey, I'm going to follow what's been done by the industry rather than kind of thinking outside the box or contextually to their business a little more, maybe."
Yeah, I love that question.
Yeah.
So it's very, there's really two parts to this, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes when I speak with CISOs and I ask them, like, what is your vulnerability, or not vulnerability, what does your like red teaming look like? And they say, well, we have
Yeah.
a person dedicated to scanning for vulnerabilities on the outside and sometimes on the inside of the environment. And that's fine. And that checks the box, right? And it validates that, yes, I am looking into what my gaps are on vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, when we're thinking about threat emulation, like what will the adversary do? You really need to go to parties that are able to actually go that additional step above and potentially even get hired, right? Or figure out how do you actually, how are you and your organization perceived both from the outside in terms of like what does your perimeter look like in surface
Right.
attack area, and how can you actually close that down? And then do you have a soft and gooey middle, or is it like crunchy and hard, right? Is there
Right.
actually like defense in depth controls that you're able to catch the adversary inside? Sometimes let's say the auditor's perspective, the check the box mindset is not
Right.
enough. Even if the industry says you shall follow these things, um, I've seen what happens when a pen test is extremely specific about those functions that they perform. In my experience, the true value is to find out where the gaps are, and even if you are able to catch the pen tester, let's say as a entity that hired one, you still want them to continue to find that anomaly and that gap that you want to evaluate,
So
because you
yeah,
want to
go ahead.
evaluate not just the tools, but the tools, the processes, and the people, right? So people, process, and
Right.
technology, all of them need to be under the microscope.
So if I kind of summarize a little bit what I think what you're getting at, are you saying that we should, as a CISO, not buy a pen test off the menu, but look for something, or be able to modify something to fit specifically what you believe, or what you've been told maybe the real threat uh, profile is of your organization? Is that a fair statement?
It is.
Okay.
And maybe I would qualify it a little bit. As a CISO, I kind of had an idea of where my gaps were, right? Because
Right.
I'm on the inside, I should know, right?
Yeah.
And then the question is, all right, so do I point you to where I'm looking good and strong, or do I point you to where I'm looking weak and where I need validation? And that's something that some CISOs are not as comfortable doing because like you want to show your strength, not your weakness. But the
Right.
problem is that with a pen test, you really do want to know where the gaps are and then get stronger. So I had specific goals where when I hired a pen tester, I would say, I do want you to achieve these objectives. I don't
Right.
tell them how to achieve those objectives, but I say, I want you to go steal some very important data from me, or go and see if you can get into the operational technology environment. And then the idea is, every step of the way, like even if I catch that activity through my tools, technique, through people, process, and technology controls, um, it doesn't mean that we stop. We just keep going to get where they need to go. And
Right.
I also allow them to do things. As they're moving on, right? So if they see a vulnerability or if they see a specific path, I don't stop them as long as my team understands what they're doing. And obviously, the blue team doesn't know that they're doing it, but
Right.
there is an
Yeah. Yeah.
engagement team that actually then is sitting there and controls that conversation. Uh, that is important, because you never want to end up with an uncontrolled pen test either, because you don't want to call the FBI in, and then
Right. Of course. Okay. Yeah.
something. So you need to make sure that the right people know. But then, as you build out your program for red teaming, and honestly, purple teaming is really the best engagement, is when you have that um, red team come in, right? They find the vulnerability, or they find the issue. You fix the issue. They validate the issue, and then they retest again to make sure
Yeah.
that the extent of condition is controlled. I think you really need to do all 5 of these, as opposed to just like red teamer comes in and then they leave, and then you see them next year, right? You really need to do that in the continuous,
I,
right?
I I think as an industry we sort of do a little bit of disservice to the industry when we call it a test, right? Because it feels like it takes us back to thinking of a school test. I'm going to prepare, you're going to come in, I'm going to pass or I'm going to fail. And then I'm going to show my boss how badly I did, and then I'm going to get fired, right? Or I'm going to get in trouble, right? Like I think that the way you described it, it's more of a learning exercise for everybody. It's a learning exercise for everybody. Yes, we're doing tests throughout, and those are tests, but it's not like a school test, right? And I think that's sort of what like an exam sort of mentality as well. So I think that's that kind of, and that's the trick with showing the bad stuff, right? And people always have a hesitation to show what I know I know I have a terrible environment, or I know where my faults are in my environment. Why would I exploit them and show them to everybody when I already know that, right? There's a lot of that mentality as well, psychologically, from a CISO or director of security perspective, right?
Absolutely. And so maybe a couple of use cases, right? So if you
Right.
think about a pen test when someone hires a pen test, right? Let's say if
Yep.
you're a new CISO and you come into an organization, right? You want to do a positive assessment, as in here are the controls that are implemented, let's say left of boom. But then you also want to do this negative assessment. I'm not going to say negative, but like the idea is you test your capabilities. Like how do you
Right.
stand up against an adversarial attack? And then in that instance, let's say if you're the new CISO, you're not going to get fired, right? You're doing your evaluation of the capabilities of the team.
Sure. Yeah.
That is the opportunity to say, all right, well, here are my gaps, right? And then let's go after the gaps. The challenge is, right, what is the expectation that is set with senior leadership? And if the expectation is set like, listen, I'm just trying to do a gap analysis up front. Well, let's see what happens, right? Let's see where we need to invest. That is an opportunity to highlight, like, what can you bring to the table?
Right.
Now, let's say you're an existing CISO and the program was not doing pen tests before. And now you're maybe in a culture where everybody expects a green outcome. Like everybody, like, hey, we're the best. We have everything in place.
We've been paying your salary. We've been giving you the budget you've been asking for, right? So
That's
this pen test should look green, right?
correct. And by the way, before I continue with the train of thought,
Sure.
you just reminded me. You asked me like, what do people, what do CISOs constantly underestimate? And I would say that I've always underestimated the amount of resources and funding and capabilities that I needed to ask for. I've always asked for stuff, but as a CISO, I think CISOs in general don't ask for enough. They should really be asking
Okay.
for many, many more things
Okay.
that they ask for. So
Yeah,
if
that's a clear message and a tough message, right? Because
yeah.
we've been asked to do more with less constantly, right? So
Correct. But now let's say that you're that CISO that has asked for
right,
stuff, but have not really tested the capabilities of the team. You need to set the right expectations, right? Because there's two things that a pen test does well, right? One is it measures your gaps and tells you like where you need to improve. But two, it should highlight the things that are working well, right? So
right,
you shouldn't be shy to highlight the things that work. And then you shouldn't be shy to highlight the things that they don't work. So upfront, if you have not done a pen test, it's still a gap analysis. Okay. The question is, how long can the adversary stay inside without being detected as they continue to work to achieve their
yeah,
objectives? And I would say that a very good measure. Now you have to do this over time, right? Either every half a year, every year. Oftentimes, you really need a year to get all of the extent of condition issues resolved. But unless they're urgent, right? Urgent, you just get them done right away. But the
right,
idea is you really need to show the progression of here's where I was last year, here's where I am today, and if the difference is, hey, they got to the admin credentials within 2 hours without us seeing them, compared to it took them 2 weeks to get to those credentials and we caught them outside, inside, whatever, right?
right.
The idea is you still highlight the gaps, but then you show the value that your program and the investments that you've been given um, have improved. What are the improvements, right? And so it's a measure, it's a scale, right?
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and I think when we talk about existing CISOs and being in that role, it can be extremely challenging to change the mentality of your organization. Right. One of the things I always say before I know people always want to do that yearly pen test because that's what compliance has told them or what we've told them as an industry that they need to do. Um, Before you do that, you need to really understand the threat and risk space within your organization before you move to the pen test, right? But I want to talk a little bit about frequency because it's one of the key findings from a security study last year was specifically that we found that organizations who tested more often had were more mature overall. Is it a chicken? Could be a chicken and egg problem. Are you testing more because are you testing more because as you're more mature, or are you more mature because you're testing more, right? Like those kind of back and forth. But when people ask you about testing frequency, I know it's not a magic number. I know it's not and I know that obviously things happen between annual pen tests, and even if they're not great pen tests, what do you do, right? So, what breaks down between doing sort of an annual pen test and the reality of environment change?
Yeah. So, fortunately or unfortunately, right, technological change does not it's not a step function, right? It's not like 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, right? It's a really continuum, and change will happen all the time. So, uh, ideally, you would want to have a continuous pen testing capability where it's not just like, say, 1 year in, then they leave, then 1 year they come back, and sometimes different people come in, different people come back, right? The idea is that if you can create a program where it's not even like a red teaming, but it's really a purple teaming, where
Mhm.
folks stick around, right? And then they actually have different missions, different months, right? Which you again articulate and evaluate. And then they have let's say the one big pen test a year, right? And then throughout the year, there's specific missions that people go after. And then what you can do is you can obviously validate the findings as we go along, right, from the bigger test, and then make sure that those things are fixed. And then you can continuously assess and test and retest for the ability of the SOC to actually capture the event and then
Yeah.
react to it effectively. And so less time between those tests, right? And even if you can do it continuously, like do continuous, right? Continuous purple teaming, so that
Yeah.
there is no um, uh, the SOC should always be on alert, essentially, right? They should always be anticipating the adversary being inside, and that continuous evaluation, or as close to continuous as you can get, or as small a time duration between the tests that you are comfortable with, um, that will make you much more mature much more quickly.
No, that's a good point. And when we talk about, and I know, and I'd love for us to do a little bit of a thought exercise on that specific conversation, a specific threat that you brought up in the beginning, which was, I'm a one of my users has been offered a lot of money for his password and his multi-factor authentication and everything as part of it. How, as a CISO, how would I test for that kind of thing, right? Because it's not a technology failure. You have multi-factor authentication. You have, there could be technology ways, I guess, to detect it, but there are that is a very human-based vulnerability more so than a technology-based vulnerability. Correct?
Yes, correct. So,
Yeah.
so the adversary essentially, again, we're going to go back to that inside the house thing, right? So they're
Yeah.
inside. And so the question is, if you are hiring a pen tester and you're saying like, hey, I want you to test our perimeter, and then they try to break in and they can't, and they try to this stuff and they can't, and like that, yeah, I'm secure, I'm done, right? So then that's probably not the best idea, because we're missing the fact that the adversary is already inside. So one of the missions, or one of the examples that I always asked the pen testers to do is, you're in the building, okay? You're in the building. You're not outside. You're like physically in the building. What can you do, right? See how, like, can you get on the network? That's an interesting question, right? So with your infrastructure, let's see. Okay, well, maybe yes, maybe no, depending on the
Right.
controls that are in place. And then let's say they can get in the building. All right, well, then let's continue. Here's a device, right? You have no credentials, right? Um, what can you do, right? Or let's say you're now on this device that has connection to the network. What is available to you? What kind of data can you get to? What is the over permissioning that is inside the organization? You can test that, right? And then finally, you give them access as a user, right? And to say, okay, you are a low privileged user. What can you
Right.
do?
Yeah.
Right. And then let's say they're an admin, right? You can continue to escalate. Like if they can get there, great. Then you have already identified a gap, right? And you need to improve. If you close the gap, then they're already starting at that next level. And now, like, well, you're here. What are you going to be able to do? And that way
Right.
you can figure out, what does that graph look like in terms of like, what are the interconnections? What are the capabilities at different levels of the organization? And then you can create an action priority list of what you're going to take care of, right? And then you have an ask. And that's the time. So listen, if you can get a threat emulator inside your environment before the adversary gets there, that's a great time to go ask for the funding
True.
and for the headcount and
Exactly.
for the capabilities.
I
Because
like
when
that.
the adversary gets in there, maybe the next guy is going to be asking that question. Yeah.
For sure. And I think and then at that point you can take what you've taken, because the human element here probably measured out of your cybersecurity awareness program or your regular phishing or testing program. You're never going to take away 100% of the human vulnerability to being not just decepted, but also maybe even courted, right? Like those two pieces, you're not going to take those away. Those are always going to be there. But at least now you know if it does happen, you have a higher likelihood of detecting because you've gone through the scenarios and said, hey, even if the CEO's password gets stolen or given away. God forbid your CEO is selling your information, but that at that level you at least have a good 2 points of data to start correlating the two. Correct?
Correct. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Perfect. I think we've hit a new record, Mikhail. We haven't talked about AI 20 minutes into the podcast, which is fantastic. But I'd love to ask you a question about AI and how do you see it changing not only how we think about testing or what we do from a testing perspective. How does maybe I'll broaden it up and say, how do you think AI will change what we're doing in this space?
Okay. Very, very small question, very boxed in.
Exactly.
All right. So adversaries are using AI, right? If I'm an adversary, I'm going to use all the tools that I can to achieve my objectives, right? Uh, as defenders, we also need to use AI. So we need to use both of them, both for threat emulation capabilities, right? Both for that spear phishing or for social engineering that, let's say, the pen tester may use, but also for the vulnerability identification, right? If there's a CVE out there, right, the adversary is going to be very, very quick to develop those exploits. And so you need to be ready and you need to evaluate kind of your patching program because you know that the adversarial AI capability is there to attack you at its hours. It's not days once the CVE is
Right.
published.
Right. You're talking about
Um,
speed to 0 day, right?
Correct.
From
Not
yeah,
even 0 day. It doesn't have to be 0 day.
to
If
vulnerability.
a
Yeah.
CVE is published, right? So let's say if somebody's vulnerability program says
Hmm.
it take me a week to patch my external environment, externally facing environment, the adversary doesn't need a week anymore. They need a couple of hours.
Right.
So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is there's AI now available for defenders, right? So think about it, automatic attack disruption capability. Let's say, and I'm always a big proponent of the platform solution. Obviously,
Mhm.
Microsoft has a pretty wide one, but the idea is that regardless of the platform that you use, right, there's AI built in, right? Can your AI detect the adversary that is coming in, right, and
Right.
take action? And are you configured and enabling it to take those actions? So then, obviously, then you can test the AI capabilities of your defense. And then, right, that's kind of like the adversarial versus the defender mindset. And then there's the user mindset, right? So AI for the business purpose, right? So for the modern work AI, the co-pilots of the world, right, and all
Right.
the other capabilities that exist, they really enable organizations to become those frontier organizations that kind of develop new things and escalate and expand ideas, etc. Those advancements in AI usage create a whole new attack surface area. Whether the adversaries are going to go after the models, whether they're going to go after the usage, whether they're going to go after the data, um, whether they're going to be going after the AI application security or the identities. Nowadays, everybody's talking about agentic AI,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Exactly.
How many people are actually treating those agents as true identities on the network? You really need to apply the same management capabilities, the same conditional access, the same validations for those agentic identities as you would for a general user. So going after that attack surface area of that AI ecosystem that organizations have created is very, very crucial. As well as, and I'm going to mention just one more thing, right? So
Sure. Yeah.
you need to validate the tendency of your AI, right? So if you are in a place where you are very overly permissive with AI usage, that means that an adversary can take your data, right? Theoretically, if they're on the inside, and then
True.
take it out through potentially going through other AI means or other capabilities. And there is a significant potential for data loss there. I would
Uh,
urge companies to evaluate their risk posture from that perspective.
and I mean, from all those areas you're talking about, it sounds like we're making, as we broaden into more and more AI use, testing is going to be much more. There's going to be many other areas to test in, and other different ways of testing. I know as a company, we've launched, AI pen testing for prompts, AI pen testing for systems, for models. Right? Those areas need to be launched, but there's also, we continue on this arms race. Right? There's more development from the attacker perspective. There's also advancement from the defense side and the tech and the testing side of it as well. So,
Correct. And if you can, if again, as we continue on this AI journey, right, it is a must to test the AI risks and the AI capabilities, right, to make sure that we are able to protect the usage of AI as we continue to go forward.
for sure, for sure. I wanted to ask you a question more specific to culture. So when we talk about culture and leadership around testing, um, and if you could reset one expectation between security teams and leadership when it comes to testing, what would that be?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I would say embrace the red.
Right. Okay. I like that.
I'll double click on that because oftentimes there's just so much pressure to be in the green. Okay, like don't show red to the board, don't show red to the CEO.
Hmm.
I think it's a huge mistake, right? So like embrace the red. Set expectations, like don't get fired, right? But the
Right.
idea
Right.
is set expectations that there will be things that we need to work on, right? Because if everything is green, then why do they need the CISO, right?
Yeah.
I mean, then the risk is addressed, right? So testing is a tool. And pen testing is one of those tools that I used extensively to ask for more funding, ask for more capabilities, ask for better integration, as an example, right? So one of the things, and I'm going to go back again to like, when did I underestimate? It's the
Okay.
integration effort across all these multiple tools.
Yeah.
So again, maybe this is the time to say, hey, I may need a faster turnaround time for implementing new capabilities. So that maybe this is the time to go to the platform, right? And then the idea is that if you set the expectation path, saying that I will show you improvements, and I really hope that you fix the issues because issues do tend to come back up. So you really want to do maybe a small pen test internally to validate that
Right.
those things are done before you do the official pen test, right? But the idea is that uh, you really want to show the value of your program, show what is necessary, and have both short-term asks and long-term asks, and set short-term and long-term expectations. And one of the coolest things that you can do, I don't know if you can do it, but if you can
Mhm.
set the leadership's, if you can tie the leadership pay to security outcomes, that could be tremendous, right? Because then
Wow. Okay.
they would be a champion for you, right?
Right.
And also,
Are you talking about leadership as in your bosses when you're a CISO? Is that what you're talking about?
yeah, or even like this senior leader, like the C-suite of the organization overall. So
Right.
obviously, there has to be a culture already in place for that, right? But okay, one of the things to consider is work with your enterprise risk management program and say, are you considering cyber as one of the top two risks of the organization? And if you're not, ask yourself why. And then maybe this is like the opportunity to set the expectation that cybersecurity risk is not a technical risk. It is a boardroom level risk, right? It is a company ending risk, right?
Yeah, and that's a good point. I think as cybersecurity practitioners, and because we come from from the technical side of the house, we want to lean together with IT, and we need to like to break those silos you talked about. I think it's important, but we spend very little time comparing ourselves or spending time with the financial risk side of the house, which is at the end of the day, cyber risks are financial risks unless they're safety
Of
risks,
course.
which is even more important anyway, right? It's unless they're personal safety risks, which there are with cybersecurity. Um, Trying to have a conversation with that side of the house actually might be even easier than to have a conversation with the IT side of the house or the developer side of the house or any other side of the house that we thought we were closer to, because we have the same goals, which is risk, diminishing
Mhm.
risk. right?
Correct. Risk
So
mitigation. It's
risk
absolutely that.
mitigation,
Yeah,
absolutely, absolutely,
absolutely.
and I love the concept of and I would love if any of our listeners could reach out and say, "Hey, I was able to have that conversation, right? I was able to have that conversation with the risk folks. They actually listen to me because we share things." I always say that the financial risk industry is miles ahead of the cybersecurity risk industry, and there's a lot we can learn from where they've been and where they've gone. You look at financial controls for any organizations, they're way bigger and way more sophisticated than what we do in cybersecurity at this point. They're different, but I would say that that's a really good piece of advice. I think try if you can try and spend time with those folks and get. I mean, I would love to see KPIs for leaders, security KPIs that leaders need to follow. That's a fantastic piece of advice for sure.
I'll throw in one other piece,
Please,
and that's I always had because you're talking about like breaking down the silos and talking to that line of
yeah,
business, not necessarily just IT. Because sometimes when we talk to IT, you don't want to call your baby ugly, right?
right.
And they sometimes IT and security is very much aligned, and you really need to actually. It's tougher to break those barriers
Hmm.
to some extent. But when I talked with the business owners and the business leaders, in general, I always told them like, okay, so I'm going to fail, right? Let's say I fail.
Yeah,
There's a chance that that can happen, right? Because there's no 100% solution, right? There's no
right.
panacea.
You're talking about failing a test, though, right? Not failing overall as
Oh,
a
well,
CISO.
let's consider
Okay,
the failure of the
sure.
actual
Okay,
thing, right?
okay.
And
Like
so I
a hole in the ground compromise.
a hole in the yeah. There's
Okay.
your system is down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How are you gonna how are you gonna operate under duress? How are you gonna maintain your business, and how are you gonna recover? So with every test, right? So business units need to start thinking about, all right, so listen, if the adversary can come in and I have gaps, that means that I'm going to continue to have gaps because we're going to continue to invest in technology and our surface attack area may continue to increase. And yes, we're going to address the majority of the risks, provided they're spending and they're dedicated enough resources to it. But what if we miss something, right? Remember, zero
Yeah.
days happen on a daily basis for external infrastructures.
Yeah.
And I mean, bad things can happen to companies all over the world. What do you do when you fail? How do you operate under duress? Are your RTOs and RPOs correct? Right? All of those things should stem from the conversation, or not really stem from the conversation, but be very much adjacent to the conversation of pen testing,
Yeah.
and really drive the discussion of resiliency. Right?
Oh, I like
So
that. No, that's a really good piece of advice. And I've got one more question for you, Mikhail. It's a bit of a callback to the killer was inside the building the whole time, kind of scary story. If these scary risks are already inside, what's the one question every organization should be asking themselves right now? And I'd ask you to think not just of the big organizations that have CISOs and CIOs and a role for security and a big security team, but let's put on the sort of classic CDW client, which could be any size of the potential listeners here, which is somebody who is, I'm in charge of all of IT and some of accounting, right? Like from that range all the way to the big, like what would you say is the one question organizations be asking themselves right now from
yeah,
a
if I think about that
inside the house?
space, right? So if I think about the NIST cybersecurity framework, right? So it's
Yeah,
identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Where we are living in this conversation is really that detect and respond mindset.
yeah,
So it's that like the needle in the haystack. Are you able to find it? I spent a lot of my time and effort working with my engineering team and my threat management teams and the SOC to figure out like what is that anomaly and what is the
mhm,
malicious anomaly, right? So that you need to make sure that there's not like a good noise to signal ratio, right? Right.
yeah,
More
yeah,
signal. You want more signal, less noise.
yeah,
But
yeah,
the idea is the question is, are you able to detect that insider risk in time, and are you able to respond quickly? Okay, and so there's two parts to that, right? One part is, do I have all of the signaling and the integrations between all of my domains, right? Identity, device, infrastructure, data, AI, network. Do I have all of that information where I can make and or not even me, where the AI in my defense platform
Yeah.
can make that determination and actually take action, because sometimes it's minutes. It's
Yeah.
oftentimes minutes
Yeah.
before impact happens to an organization. And so if you are unable to do that, right, then that's a concern, right? So I would find ways to evaluate an organization's capability to be able to detect the anomaly and then to see if they can respond to it effectively, right? That is a huge, huge question that I would be asking myself and my team.
You're talking about doing a lot of homework
Oh,
before,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
of course.
that's really what it comes down to, right? Making sure that you've got the earlier phases ready before the test, and then when the test comes, you get your hands dirty and do a lot of the back and forth purple team exercises you're saying,
Correct.
right?
And I would
Yeah,
say that again, if I'm a new CISO, there's no homework because I haven't seen it, right?
yeah,
So I want to do it. The second time that I do it as a CISO, then I better have those findings remediated for the next time that I do the test. The worst thing that
sure.
can happen, and that can be a career limiting event if the same vulnerabilities are found, right?
Yeah, no, very very true, very true, for
Oh, and
sure.
one more thing. Don't
Sure.
assume that if somebody tells you that the remediation is done, don't there's a good saying, trust but verify, right? So
Yeah,
the idea
yeah,
is you want to make sure that the remediations are validated, because oftentimes they're not. And then the processes to make sure that they don't resurface is also important, to making sure that that vulnerability management program and the validation of controls internally is continuous as well. So lots of homework, yes, but detect the anomaly and be able to respond to it
yeah.
is a huge priority.
Retesting is very much key, right? And just because the patches are applied, sometimes they don't always work the way you think they do, or there is something that was done differently that needs to be paid attention to, and that not yeah, and not to focus specifically just on technical gaps. There's also human and
Of
people
course.
process gaps that are typically part of this as well. Well, we've come to time now, Michaela. This is fantastic. Thank you again. It's always fun talking with you.
Likewise.
This feels like one of our normal conversations, so it's really nice to be able to have you here. And thank you for being a friend of CDW and a friend of CDW Tech Talks. And I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Likewise, Ivo. Thank you so much for inviting
Thank you
me.
very much. Yeah, have a great day. Bye bye.